Hello YouTube, it's DasGregor, and welcome back to a Gentoo in review. Today we are going to be looking at a topic that I know I've discussed in previous videos, but for the life of me, just by looking at my video titles and descriptions, I can't figure it out myself. And recently a viewer was referred to me with these types of questions, and I was going to point him to a video that I had done and realized I can't even figure this out on my own, and I am not about to start watching all my videos to find the segment where I discuss this. So, without further ado, I'm going to make this a dedicated view or video on the use flags and portage for Gentoo. Gentoo uses a method called portage to allow you to install all your software. When setting up Gentoo, for instance, you will synchronize the portage tree to Gentoo's master server, normally with an emerge, let me get back into here, with an emerge -- sync. And when you do that, it goes out, it looks at the main websites, and it starts to synchronize all of the packages and the e-builds with the master e-builds. Now this can take, depending upon your system, anywhere from a couple minutes to 10 minutes or more if you've got a slower system, which is why Gentoo sometimes isn't exactly the best choice when using older hardware. So you don't have to sit here and wait for all this to go through. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video for a short second, and when it's done, we will move on to the next item of business. Okay, and it has finished synchronizing all those files. You'll see, for instance, the number of files here. We have a lot. Looks like 178,525 files. They transferred 41,263. You can see that the total file size is 316 megs and some change. That they transferred about 99.3 megs there. It gives you some stats, about what it had to do to update. If there are any problems with the portage profiles, etc., it's going to update them right here. Another method that you can do besides emerge -- sync is to use this command right here, emerge -- web rsync, which will do the same thing. Now, one thing when you're doing portage updates, you don't want to be sitting there and spam the server 2 and 3 times a day. If they see you doing that, there is warning verbiage at the beginning of this that actually states that if they see you abusing this, they will terminate you or blacklist your IP address so that you can't do that, because they don't want you to take down their servers and create some sort of a denial of service. For the most part, I haven't ever had trouble, but it does make me a little leery sometimes, even if I have to do a sync twice in one day. The reality is, though, once a week is probably good. Once every couple of days is alright as well. You really don't need to do this on a regular basis to synchronize. Now, as I was saying, you can set use flags 3 different ways. One way is to set it globally within the MAKE.conf file. The second method is to set it per application in a PACKAGE.use file, and the third method is to actually type in except _ keyword, or not keyword, use. Oh dear. You know what? It's been so long since I've actually done it at the command line. You can do it at the command line. and I'm thinking it's accept use, and now I'm not sure, so I don't want to talk about that. We're gonna ignore that for now until I figure it out, and then I'll get back to that one. The two main methods, because these are the two that I use the most, are globally setting them for your whole system or just setting them for the package. Now, both of the files that you would edit for this are located in etc portage. And you will see in etc portage you have MAKE.conf in here. You also have package.use, package.unmask, package.accept keywords. All of these files are what you would edit to be able to set different features within the Gentoo package setup. If we look at make.conf, let's go ahead and do a nano on that. And I must have screwed up because that's right. I did not fully qualify that name. /etc portage make.conf. Now, make.conf used to be at the root of etc, and recently, within the last 3 to 5 months, maybe a little longer, somewhere in there, they've decided to relocate that into the portage location. Now, I'm going to bring up a few things. If you look at, for instance, my old make.conf, now this is from an old system that I had used on the same computer hardware, you will see that my use option here, which is right here, goes on and on and on. You'll notice here, if I scroll to the right, it just goes and goes and goes. And that's because when I first started using Gentoo about 10 or so years ago, it seemed like the method of procedure was to go ahead and put every use flag or minus use flag that you would ever want inside of your make.conf and have it go global. As you see, that just pretty much is crazy. All that stuff in there. And in the long run, that can cause you a lot of trouble. Because what this means is that any package that, for instance, uses or has set the ability for AAC is going to get that turned on inside that package to compile it with AAC, or with ALSA support, or with Blu-ray support. Now, sometimes you don't want a package. You might want package A to be compiled with a specific use flag, but even though package B has the possibility of being compiled with that use flag, you might not want that package to compile with that use flag, or you might find that another feature within that program requires you to enable a different use flag, which then conflicts with a default use flag that you have set globally. If you watch, for instance, my little video on installing Chromium in Gentoo, you'll find, for instance, the ICU use flag, which is required by a lot of different things, is required for Chromium to install correctly. And if you did not set the ICU use flags in certain areas, it pretty much breaks a lot of stuff. So that's one of those that works really well to have it right at the global level. So if we look at my new use flag area here, you will see that Bindist, MMX, SSE, and SSE2, those are default that Gentoo has when you first set it all up, and I left them in there. I did, however, add Python because I want everything to be built with Python support, and ICU I added for the Chromium support. And if you look here, this is much smaller and easier to manage than what I had been using in previous years. If we look at the portage file for this, which manages use flags by application, we get into portage, and then it's package.use. package.use. You will see now what we have done here. For instance, with this top one, Net Wireless WPA Supplicant. I do not really care to have the GUI interface for WPA Supplicant. I never use it. It just creates a wasted spot within the GUI. So I tell it negative Qt4 so it doesn't create the Qt4 GUI interface to that. If you go through and look at this, for instance, I also had to rebuild Firefox with minus bindist. What bindist does is if the package has a bin file or a pre-built package, if bindist is available, as it is globally set, then it goes and grabs that already pre-compiled package and throws it on the system. Sometimes it can be handy to have a package that's already been built for your system so that you don't have to sit there and watch it compile for hours upon hours and sometimes even go into days. Other times, though, it's better just to go ahead and compile it from the source. Now, I don't like, when you do Firefox with bindist, you actually get Iceweasel. Some cases you get Aurora. You get other named versions of Firefox, but it's still Firefox, and I prefer to have the Firefox look and feel and don't want something else. So that's why I use a negative bindist. And then, of course, there's a couple other options I have in there that I just threw in GStreamer for utilizing for multimedia within Firefox, and I'm not sure what the Wi-Fi, other than giving it wireless access. Another thing, for instance, in my cups for printer, I found that I could not get my wireless network printer to work properly until I added the GNU TLS option to build cups with. I also never plug in with a USB because everything's always over the network, so I subtract and don't build it with USB support. The less that you can build something, the less bloated the package is going to be. Now, I've got a lot of things here, actually, not just a few, where I have set up. These up here are pretty much the ones that I do. As it says here, my changes to package.use, and I add those at the top. Sometimes, however, when you go to install a program with emerge-AV, for instance, it'll pop up and it'll say, for this to work proper, we're going to need to add something to the use flags to make it work. And if we look, for instance, at Python, it pretty much was saying that required by Firefox, it was going to require Python to be built with SQLite. Also, it says here, required by Firefox. And this is nice. When you let the system do this, then it puts those comments in there for you so that you don't have to worry about, why do I have that set? Why am I using that? Right here, for instance, it's saying this is also required. GST plugins meta needs to be set up with FFmpeg. Kdevelop, all there's some requirements for that. So Qt declarative needs WebKit. Now, OpenShot is one of those things that I was using the Sabayon repository for it. I'm not sure I'm using that anymore, but it doesn't matter. If you let Portage take care of itself, it will do a good job at documenting and setting up these use flags. And it's a good thing to get away from setting things up globally in your MAKE.conf and putting them inside of the package.use. Now, while we're looking at these, let's also take a look at, for instance, the accept keyword package. Now, sometimes packages that are still in testing, they normally have a tilde on them. And if you're in an x86 system, it'd be like tilde x86. Or if you're a 64-bit, you're going to see that tilde AMD 64. If you want to be able to allow programs that need to be installed, that you want to try out, that aren't exactly ready for distribution, you have to come in here and set them up and accept keywords. And for instance, here we're letting LZMA version 9.2 be installed even though it still may have bugs. GUVC View 1.71, etc. Now the nice thing about this is when you allow it to do this through the emerge process, it specifically states the version number, and that's good, because if your version number changes to 1.72 and say 1.7, if you didn't have that, then anytime a new package came out for GUVC, it would try to install the testing version, the one that hasn't been fully operational and may have bugs. And sometimes you just want to make sure that you're just looking at the one version that you want to use. Version 1.72 might come out stable with no problem, but at the same time that 1.72, for instance, came out stable, 1.73 came out in testing and isn't ready for production. And because if you didn't have that 1.71 here, it would go ahead and grab the testing version of 1.73. Now that's just a figurative example, not a real world example, because I don't know what the version numbers for that is, but it's something to think about. We get out of that there. Now Portage is all found inside of user Portage, and if we do a search of the directory, you'll see all of the categories that you're looking for. If you're ever wondering if you have more than one version, for instance, if we looked up a -S on GUVC viewer, this thing's going to come up and it's going to tell us that we have 1.71 installed and 1.71 available, but it also tells us that it's in media video GUVC. So if we go to media video GUVC and we look at what's in here, we see that we could actually install version 1.61 and we could also install 1.71, and 1.72 is available as well. That gives you an idea, though, if you're looking for a specific version of an application and the emerge-s is only showing you 1.71, that there are other ways to look at that. Now that command line that I talked about, that pretty much, I was on the right track, but it's been a while since I'd done it. If you type in use all capitals equals, get your quotes out, and for instance, any use flag like bin dist, and then emerge, and then the package atom, that is going to use that specific one. You can set that at the command line, but I highly recommend that you don't do that, because you will forget that you built a specific package that way, and then it may come back to bite you, because the next time that package needs to get installed or updated, it's not going to use that use flag again, because it's getting automatically updated through an emerge world, and you will lose anything that you have done at the command line. The only time that you want to use this type of a command at the command line is if you're just testing different use flags to see if they will fit and work. And once you find one that fits and works, you really should go ahead and add it to your package.use file within the etc portage area. There's one more thing too I'd like to discuss with you guys about my MAKE.conf file, for instance. Let's get back into there. That's not the right thing, sorry. Find make. Sometimes it's just faster just to type it out. As you can see, my old MAKE.conf had a lot of stuff in there. My new one, a lot more minimalistic. But there's a few things that I want to make mention that has made life a lot better for myself. And that is this option right here. Emerge underscore default ops. I think those are underscores in there. Yeah, there's underscores in there. Emerge underscore default underscore ops equals dash dash auto unmask dash write. And of course, the accept licenses, that just saves you when it says, oh, I want to accept you. I'm sorry, but 99.99% of the time, you're going to want to accept those. And unless you just are real stickler for reading the EULA, to me, EULAs are worthless. They're a way for a company to throw something in your face. But the reality of it is, you're going to accept it if you want to use the program. And there's almost absolutely nothing that they could say in your EULA that would deter you from doing that, unless you had another alternative application that didn't have such a restrictive or horrible end-user license agreement. Face it, people, when PS3 or Xbox or any of those other consoles comes up and says, "Oh, we've changed our EULA," and "we've updated to the new version of this firmware." You don't have to upgrade this firmware, but if you don't accept the EULA and do it, your box is worthless. You cannot log in. You cannot use your applications. You cannot do anything else. So what am I going to do? Am I going to brick everything and say, absolutely not. I can't believe the EULA states that. I'm not going to accept that. So what happens? You brick your unit until you do accept their EULA. And what option do you have? It's the most ridiculous thing in the planet that you have to even accept an end-user license agreement because you don't have a choice. There's no freedom in an end-user license agreement. And I know a couple of years ago there was something on one of my tech shows where they were talking about how a certain company actually put in there that if you're reading this by now and if you accept this, you can go and this website and you can get something because you read the EULA. Most people don't read these because really it's a bunch of garbage written by legalese lawyers and it means absolutely nothing to you. Sorry for the rant. It's just, that's why I add it in my accept licenses with the EULA. Yeah, for the most part, if I'm installing it, I'm going to accept it because you don't really have a choice. Yeah. If you're setting up a GUI interface such as KDE or XFCE, even GNOME or GNOME as you say it, you want to make sure your video cards are set proper. Now, I always have NV as a backup just in case Nouveau doesn't work, but I don't use the proprietary drivers anymore. I used to use the proprietary drivers for NVIDIA, but Nouveau's gotten to a point where most everything I do, it works perfectly fine. And then in the input devices, Synaptics is probably good enough, but if I ever plugged in a USB mouse, I wanted that to be there too. EVDev and keyboard. And of course I use Layman, and Layman is for external portage packages. Now I do know that I did talk about Layman. There is a video about Layman, installing it and using it. So maybe I talk about use flags in that video. That's the sad thing when there's just so much information I've tried to give out to you guys. Going on, that's pretty much all I really wanted to talk about with the rest of this MAKE.conf file. And sadly enough, this has of course gotten way too long already. We're up into the 23-minute mark. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out for now. Hopefully this kind of talks about a little bit more on use flags, what the purpose of them are, how you can set them either globally or for package specific settings. If you have any detailed questions that I didn't talk about here, please let me know in the comments section below. And I'm not sure why some comments I can't see or I can't reply to them because they say they're linked comments of some sort. But if you're going to ask a question and you want to reply back in the comments section, please just make it so it just uses YouTube's commenting and not this horrible, horrible Google Plus junk that we're being forced into using, because it's driving me nuts. I mean, if you can't get a product and get people to use it, you shouldn't force people to have to use it just to get people to I would like I said to a fellow YouTube reviewer of Linux just the other day. I was tricked into even signing up for Google Plus and wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. Especially after within the last couple months I got rid of Facebook because of all the privacy crap it had. The last thing I want is all of this junk with Google Plus. And I was tricked into using it. Don't want it, didn't want it. And after I saw what happened to a couple of YouTube channels because they disabled Google Plus after the fact and lost their channel and everything, I'm not about to try to disable it now. I'm just stuck with it until Google decides to retire it, like they've done with anything else that they've actually made that was halfway usable. You know, that's one good thing about Google is if you don't like one of their products, don't worry, they'll delete it and retire it soon. The problem is if you did like one of their products and used it, sad thing is they'll retire it soon and you'll have to find another solution anyway. Yeah. Anyway, end of this recording. Whether it's morning, evening, noon, or night, whatever you're having, enjoy it. Thank you for watching. Have a great holiday season. This will be the last Gentoo in review before Christmas. Oh, golly. Christmas is going to be on the day I normally do Gentoo in reviews. I may see what I can do to do something ahead of schedule and have it ready for you guys. Otherwise, I'm not sure if I'll have one next week, it being Christmas and all. But we'll see. We'll see. We'll definitely have a new First Impressions Linux distribution. I'll still have that. But we'll see about the other. Thanks for watching. Y'all have a good one. Be safe with all the holidays. And we'll talk to you later. Bye.